And just talk a little bit about the shift in the occupation. So, we know that large numbers of women go out to work in the 70s and they require domestic help at home. That domestic workers now, at least in theory, come under the Fair Labor Standards Act and therefore have some protection. And does that induce other women to enter domestic service? Or
at the very time when the domestic worker rights movement was beginning, we also see a change in the immigration law in 1965, which allows more immigrants to come into this country. And one of the outcomes of that is a shift in the occupation, in the workforce of paid domestic labor. So there are more and more women from Asia, from Latin America, who are entering the occupation of domestic work. So even as African American domestic workers are organizing, there are fewer and fewer African American women in the occupation of domestic work. This is also a time when civil rights laws are being passed and African American women have more opportunities outside the occupation of domestic work. But the occupation is becoming more diversified with a greater number of immigrant women, both documented as well as undocumented. The African American women who are leading the domestic worker rights movement begin to reach out to and attempt to organize these new immigrant workers. I think that's really important because we hear a lot about tensions and economic competition between the African American community and immigrant community. And there certainly are ways in which there's a perception that immigrants can undercut the wages of African Americans, can take jobs away from them. But the African American domestic worker leaders actually attempt to build a broad-based movement. And they say that if in fact we're going to overcome the fundamental exploitation of domestic workers, we have to include all women in our larger movement.
And yet, at this point, would you estimate that the largest number of nannies and people working in private households are immigrant women who come from abroad to take those jobs in order, most of the time, to help their families back home?
Absolutely. By the early 1970s, the vast majority of domestic workers are immigrant women. And so the proportion of African American women in the occupation is shrinking dramatically. Many of the immigrant women who are coming in are transnational migrants. They're very often mothers themselves. They are sometimes leaving their children in their home countries and sending money back to their home countries to support their children. And this is a trend that we see rapidly expanding after the 1970s. New York City, for example, becomes what the scholar Saskia Sassen calls a global city, where there's a growing sector of service workers, many of whom are domestic workers.
But this is a really interesting cycle that we have going here of some women, mostly affluent women, getting very good jobs, hiring poorer women who are leaving their children behind to take care of the children who are getting very good jobs. At the same time as this occupational structure shifts, African American, Latino women who used to take the poorest jobs are moving up slightly in the wage labor force, taking jobs as perhaps clerks or in office work, or becoming health aides and such things. So in a way, you can see a kind of wave-like interaction among these groups of women, each reliant on the other group of women to take care of needs that might otherwise have been taken care of in a single-family home.
Yes. You know, I think one of the lessons we can draw from the women's movement of the 1960s is precisely the divisions among women and the ways in which the goals of liberation, of personal liberation for middle-class women, which they defined in terms of employment opportunities outside the home, was in fact dependent upon somebody else coming into their home to take care of the care work and the cleaning work that they were unable to do because they were now in the workforce. And so there's a real contradiction there in terms of the ways in which we think about the larger goals of feminist liberation, and something that I think feminists have to grapple with.